Get ready, you guys, because today we're building an entire swamp as a habitat for the Mute Swan and Fallow deer. So never has a build ever wanted me to use mods more than this one. Because, first of all, I don't have anything against mods. Like, if you use mods, you're fine. I just like the challenge and torture of not using them, especially in these kinds of situations. But basically, I wanted to have a main part, but then also have these kind of piers going over the water, but I wanted them to be as close to the water as possible. I also wanted them to be different from the main pot, because the main pot is the 4 meter, like the regular 4 meter pot, and I wanted a 3 meter pot just to make it so that you really have a main pot and then you have these side pots. But because these pots are so close to the water and because they're 3 meter wide, means that first of all I had to use the queues, because if you want to get those smaller pots without using like free build or something, you need to use the queues to get the smaller pots. But then also, you can build the pots over the water, but you can't place the pots when there is water. So every time I had to like redo the pots or something, I had to make sure that the water was already there. But then trying to get it fixed so that it's on the right level, like basically I had to have the staircases already built in and then delete everything of the pot itself before I could put the water back in, because it's just, why? Like, why is this? Again, like, this made me want to get free build so much, and I only showed you a short clip of the pain. The full clip of everything when it came to the pots is 2 hours long. So that would have been half this video, would just be me struggling to get the pots right. After I got the pots right, I was just like, yes, we're not touching this again. Like, there's 3 of these like sort of floating pots, these kind of piers going through the swamp. 2 of them are on like the main body of water. And we are just not touching that water ever again. Like, even if it's annoying for me to build, I'm not touching that water ever again, because it's too much suffering. I like a little bit of suffering, but not that much. Like, suffering with consent is the main thing, and I did not consent to the water being this annoying. I mean, in the end it looks really great, so there's a great end result. But yeah, this definitely was like, was the suffering really worth it? Yes, it always is, because it looks great and I can get through it with therapy. So yeah, this was just the main idea, and then of course, you know, make the pots look a little bit nicer and make them not have that like really visible concrete base, because I don't know why we have it, but it's so limiting, because these pots look like they're just sort of, like they look too thick. Like when it comes to like these floating piers, I really forgot what these are named. So let me know down below in the comments what these are named, because Poison doesn't know the English language or language in general. But usually these are like maybe 25 centimeters thick. Like, it's basically just a few planks. But because Plant Zoo has this concrete base to every pot that is even a little bit higher than just the ground, it's just so, it looks a little bit awkward, so I tried to hide it a bit. It did eventually turn out alright, but I would have definitely preferred it if I could just make it look kind of more floaty. Like, that's just the entire thing of just like, I want it to feel like you're kind of floating over the water. I also would have liked it if I could make supports for these pots that didn't really look like just thick. Like, that's the entire problem of the pots, is just they are too thick. Like, usually, again, these pots are like a few planks and then a few beams holding it up above the water. But you can't really do that in Plant Zoo, because that concrete base is just limiting everything that I want in life. Like, if I have a nemesis, it's the concrete base of the pods. That's my nemesis for Planet Zoo. Also, my nemesis is just water. Like, I am the wicked bitch of the east. I melt in water. Actually, that's... well... this just brings me back to when I still delivered newspapers. And I didn't mind the rain as much. Wind was the worst thing. Because then the newspapers would just like go everywhere, and they would actually, once it was just, the wind was that strong that I was holding a newspaper to deliver, and it just ripped because the wind just pulled on it that much. Problem with rain is like the newspapers, no matter what you do, they get soggy because you have to like open the bag with all the newspapers that frequently, that there's just rain or water going to come in, and then it just gets soggy, and then they sort of weirdly stick together. So if you are in not the best mood, which you never are because you're spending an hour walking and cycling through the rain, nobody's going to be happy after that. But if you just pull on it a little bit too much, then it will just stare again. Like, it will just become a mush. How did this swamp bring us to newspapers? Because water. Like, for once, there is actually some reasoning behind the rambling. Also, why are we building an entire swamp, which is actually around 4,000 square meters? I said on Twitter, like, oh yeah, it's 3,000. No, Poison. It's actually, to be completely honest, it's like 3.8 thousand. 3,800, I think that's the right way to say it, square meters. Why did I build that for the swans? First, because I wanted a fuck ton of swans. Because why not? Like, I didn't just want 2 swans. I didn't want to build a small habitat because this is the first European habitat. I really didn't want to touch the Europe area for such a long time. And then it was just like, we got swans. We got the first waterfall. Well, fuck me, I guess. Now we're going to build that European area. Even though I've still not finished the African area, we have been afraid of touching the Asian highlands. And damn that Australian area. We have not finished any areas yet. Well, actually, the central area is finished. I will take that as a win. Like, for once, I finished something. And it wasn't in the bedroom. I probably should have cut that out, but we're just going to stick with that. But anyways, so yeah, of course, I'm really happy that we got birds, or at least a bird. Also, Bolt was just so happy that, like, it's a bird, but it doesn't fly. Like, that's the thing of like, oh yeah, we want birds, we want them to fly, and then we get a bird that doesn't fly. Actually, I mean, everybody knows swans fly in real life. Frontier just has an obsession with clipping birds' wings. Like, the peacock also is supposed to be able to fly, and it doesn't. Like, and also, who was it? I think it was Claire who was like surprised of like me saying like, oh yeah, we have peacocks close by us. Like, some family just had them in their garden. And it was just like, what? And it was like, yeah, I saw them like every morning going to high school. I saw them just like, there were 2 peacocks, like male peacocks, because the females are kind of boring to keep in your garden because you want that feathery thing. But yeah, I just saw peacocks in somebody's garden. They kept them as pets. But yeah, Frontier, for some reason, it's just like, no, peacocks don't fly. But they actually are able to fly. Actually, I've never seen a peacock fly. Like, especially like the bills. Is it just like a cape that they have behind them then? Or at least when you look at them flying, does it then just look like a cape going behind them? Now I kind of think like, if you saw a peacock fly, it would kind of look like a phoenix, or like how you usually think of as phoenixes. Like, you usually think of like a really long, feathery tail. At least I think of that. When I think phoenixes, I always think of like, oh yeah, they have that like long tail with like the long tail feathers and such. Is it proper to call it a tail? I don't know. Anyways, I was supposed to talk about why are we building a swamp? well, as I said, this is the first European habitat, so I wanted it to be a whammer. And then I realized, yeah, we have birds, so we're going to have like an extensive water feature. Why not build a swamp instead of a pond? Because like, yeah, pond is kind of like, nah, I've done that too many times. I wanted to build a swamp. But I wanted to build a pretty swamp, which is just, I want to build a swamp. Because, yes, swamps can be pretty. Also, they are very, like, I think essential for, like, the ecosystem. Just, like, it's one of those, like, ecosystems that's, like, really diverse because there's so much plant life. The only thing that I didn't really, well, the thing that was more difficult for me building the swamp was just like, it's so much grass. Like there's bushes and grass, but there's not that much trees because it's like really, I mean, mushy water. Well, not mushy water, mushy ground. So there's not a lot of like nutrients, I think, or not enough for them to really grow. So you have like a few trees, although I put in a little bit more trees because trees are pretty. Also, we're building a bridge, which I should have probably mentioned, but then these voiceovers, especially this one, because like this video is a whammer, but these voiceovers get so weird sometimes. And no, I never remember what I talked about in the voiceovers. That's just the thing. I just start talking. Like I sometimes have like points of like, oh, I want to talk about this, and this, which I said in the previous video already. And like this shows how much I remember of my videos. It's a little, but I almost never realize like, oh yeah, I wanted to talk about that, and then my brain just goes like you hear the Windows startup sound or like the whenever I start recording because my brain just shuts off. Anyways, more pots because. Yeah, I don't know how the deer are going to be very happy with this. I mean, there's a large area of grass and just not swamp because usually when I build habitats, the habitat has one theme, and then if I want to kind of build like an area where it goes through multiple biomes, like it goes from like, let's say the Australian area, I want it to go from beachy to like more inlands. I usually have like one habitat is beachy, then you have a sort of transitional habitat where it's not as beachy, and then you get a fully like inlands habitat. Although even a transitional habitat is usually like, if it's like going from a beachy habitat to, or beachy biome to a more inland biome, it's usually like, it's a little bit like, it takes a little bit more from one than the other. Because I have like one habitat or biome already as a reference point, so I'm going to use that. This habitat though is like that entire transition in one. So usually I spread it out, that transition over habitats, so that you have one habitat that's fully one biome, then you have the transition habitat and then the other. Here it's just like, we are going from swamp straight into grasslands or hilly terrain. And before you ask, yes, not all of the Netherlands is swamp. If you go to the east or the south or the southeast, you will get eventually hilly terrain. Not as hilly as like most people will probably think of when you think of hilly, but like for us, it's hilly. To me, that just sounds like I'm like saying like a name. Like hilly is probably a name. I mean, the weirdest things are names right now. I mean, wasn't there like what is it? The Elon Musk, I think, who named his child like just a string of numbers. Like he pretty much just gave his child a like scanner code as a name. So yeah, everything is a name now. I could say beep boop blah blah blah, and probably somebody is like, hey, he called my name, and it's like, yeah, your name is bleep bloop blah. You are probably an alien. Or your parents were dropped as a child. Anyways, back to the actual video. So, also building a stairs because I when it came to the floating parts, I just wanted stairs. I wanted a very quick get up. Although later on we will kind of change the stairs, because the main thing with Naturalis is of course wheelchair accessibility and just accessibility for those with limited mobility. And yeah, stairs, like even if you have like the greatest like handrails as such, you're not going to easily be able to get a wheelchair up, especially not if you want a wheelchair up by yourself. Like if the person in a wheelchair wants to get up, like, yeah, that's not going to happen with a staircase. And that's also a thing of like accessibility that I want to think about, is just like, I don't want people in like a wheelchair or crutches or any sort of limited mobility to be dependent on others, because yeah, they will just go to the zoo themselves. It's not like, oh, a wheelchair is their entire personality, or crutches, or like their whatever is going on is not their personality. So they are going to have people in wheelchairs which are just like, yeah, I want as least help as possible because I'm fully independent, because yeah, people with disabilities are people. So I wanted to be sure of like, oh, if you're in a wheelchair, you don't have to be dependent on others here. You can do everything yourself. And so having that thing, that sounds a little bit weird, but thinking of that, later on I will make like a wheelchair sort of lift and just have it be like completely, well, actually, now that I think about it, I was like, oh yeah, it's fully independent as such. I actually forgot to put in the buttons. Like, these are sometimes the things that I just completely forget. But yeah, when it came to the wheelchair lift that we built at the end of the video, there's supposed to be buttons below and up, so that like if the lift is down, you can just call up the lift like an elevator and such. I forgot to put those in. And it's only while we're doing this voiceover, of course, that I remember, oh yeah, I forgot to put that in. Also, I made multiple mistakes during this build, just because we're on the topic of things that I forgot or that are mistakes. Because now when it came to the like piers going over the swamp area, you will see these sort of like A-shaped structures. Because at this point I thought like, oh yeah, I wanted to kind of feel industrial. Like the main idea for the European area is I wanted to feel a bit colder, like especially when it comes to like the Australian area that was like really beachy and such, and then you have the European area, and I wanted to feel kind of colder, but the kind of cold where you kind of want to go inside and just wrap yourself up in blankets and get like a hot cocoa or something, or hot chocolate. I don't know why I call it a hot cocoa, but like kind of that. Like I wanted it to feel cold, but somehow still kind of cozy. But then also just think of like, all right, maybe like slight industrial vibes to go with that. But in the end, this habitat, because there's so many grasses and also like the structure for the deer, like it was so busy that I in the end just decided, yeah, we're just not going with the industrial vibes, at least not for this habitat. So in the end, I deleted those. I also was on the verge of deleting the fences that we're building right now, because the fences for the longest time were just like, all right, what do I do? Because I wanted to have a different style than all of the other things, but then also this habitat is like the habitat that you see first of the European area, so I want you to be able to kind of see through it and see like everything behind the habitat, and that was just kind of impossible for the longest time. In the end, I just stuck with these fences because you can see through them. They're not my favorite fence, but they are manageable. Like I will not like rupture an artery just thinking of these fences. I will rupture an artery thinking of this building. Not because it's like manageable, no, but because it was just such a pain in the ass. Like that's the thing with this habitat, was just like everything is round, but a lot of European buildings are not. Like the entire idea for this habitat or for this structure was just like, farmhouse, but make it modern. Like, you could see this probably somewhere in Europe. Again, going for still, it's like colder, but still warm colors. So it's more like warm grays, warm like darker browns and such. More use of like black and such, just to give it like a very different look compared to all of the other areas. But again, like most buildings here in Europe, they're not round. And if they are round, then it's just like, yeah, this is probably like a little bit more art piece-esque. But then when it came to this building, it is supposed to be functional, because it's like supposed to be like sort of the farmhouse idea for the deer. This build was really not built for the swans, because you don't really have, at least to my knowledge, you don't have like swamp habitats in zoos here, because swamps are just everywhere. Like legit, like I talked about, like, oh yeah, when I still delivered newspapers, and it was this pond in the village that I live in, where I had to like basically a path or the road circled around it. And sometimes for like a full spring, there was a family of swans. And I do mean family, like they're not, you don't call them gooselings. Like the name for like a baby swan is like this weird name that sounds like it's some kind of flower, but I'm just going to call baby swans. And if you know, you know, but if there's baby swans, you run the other direction. Like the death stares that I got from those like parent swans, as like I had to go near them because there was like an address that I had to deliver newspapers from on like either side of the pond. So I had to go near the swans. But the death glares, like the road going like circling this pond was like 4 meters. You bet your ass I was like almost in the grass on the other side of the road, just because the death stares of those swans. And like, swans are vicious. Like, they are pretty, but they are bitches. Like, they are the Regina George of the animals. And you are not going to, like, you might be the bravest guy or the bravest person in the world. You are afraid of swans, because those bitches will fuck you up. So yes, my ass was pretty much in the grass on the other side of the road, because these swans were, well, they were actually on the road, which makes it worse. Like, swans go in the water. Like, I don't care that your baby swans can't swim yet. At least if the parents are in the water, I'm safe. Actually, that's probably not true, because they would mind it less if I was closer to them instead of like their babies. But yeah, you don't fuck with swans. But anyways, here in the Netherlands, we don't really have habitats for swans. Or maybe just in Europe, because like swans are native here, so like they are everywhere. So if there's like swans in the zoo, it's just because they flew there. Like, that's also like why I didn't mind, like, oh yeah, they're not able to fly or something, because they're just like there. Like, have I ever seen a swan fly? It's like the same thing with a peacock. Have I ever seen them fly? I know they can, but I've never seen them do that, because they are just giving me the death stare every time I see them. Oh yeah, this also just reminds me of the time that I rescued a seagull. It's like, it's the weirdest bird to rescue, but I think it was like hit by a car. And not hit as in like it was dead. Well, it might be dying. Like, that's the thing. Like, the seagull was pretty much just like on like the bicycle path. It was probably hit by a car, because like if it gets hit by a bicycle, I mean, the bicycle probably has the most damage, or at least the cyclist. If it's hit by a car, then of course the seagull is more harmed. But then it was basically just like this woman who said like, hey, can you help me get this seagull, because it was lying on the bicycle path, and there's going to be like, not motors, but like, what is it called? Scooters going over that bicycle path, because scooters are supposed to be on the bicycle path, motors and such, those still go on the main road. But like, if a scooter comes by, they're going to be probably that fast that they might run over the seagull if it's just lying on the bicycle path. So the woman asked me like, hey, can you help me like carry the seagull into the grass so that it doesn't get hit? And in my like, you know, We didn't know if the seagull was like harmed in any way. Like sometimes you have that with like birds, if they fly into a window, they're just dazed for a bit and then they fly off again. We didn't know if the seagull was really harmed. So I helped get the seagull in the grass. And seagulls are kind of heavy. You think that birds are like really light. Seagulls can be quite heavy. At least that's what I remember. That it was just like surprisingly heavy for like a bird that I thought weighed like a feather. But I got it into the grass. I cycled away. I think that the woman was going to call like the animal ambulance and such. But I have no idea what happened to the seagull afterwards. Because like I had to get home. Like I was going home from high school and it was just a seagull. They are actually kind of soft. Like that's also something that I remember. It's just like, this really feels like I'm holding a pillow. Like seagulls are very soft. They are bitches when you have food, but if they're just sitting there, and I think this is like the biggest thing of like, oh yeah, it was probably actually, now that I think about it, was probably harmed because, I mean, everything is harmed when it gets hit by a car. But it was probably like in some state of harm because like I could just pick up the seagull. Like if it was completely healthy and such, it would cause a ruckus and such, but I could just pick it up. So yeah, I've rescued a seagull. I am the Snow White because a bird let me handle it. Anyways, so the swans, I didn't really build this habitat for them. It's just like, oh yeah, fallow deer, and then they have their barn or farmhouse, and the swans probably like stay in there as well. And like the employees of Naturalis just let it be. And then over time, because I think there's 14 swans in this habitat, because I wanted an even number because I had 7 female swans. And then I realized, oh wait, swans are monogamous and I don't want a lonely swan. So I put 7 male swans in as well. Actually, I had 3 at that time, so I just put in 4 more. And then I was just like, yeah, I have so many swans in this habitat now. It's not even funny. It's just like ponds filled with swans. So yeah, if I don't put 2 animals in, I will place a fuck ton of animals in. Because I'm just like, I want even numbers. I mean, with swans it makes sense, because again, they're monogamous, made for life and such. But yeah. There's also like, I think 7 deer in here. So it's a very busy habitat. It's also a nightmare because it's just like, the deer for some reason thought they were swans. Like the amount of times that, I mean, I get it because this habitat is mostly water. But like the amount of times that I saw like, oh yeah, nice picture moment. Like all of these swans swimming in the water. And then there was just a deer. There was just a deer swimming with them. So that kind of gave me the vibes of like, you know those dogs that sometimes like they grew up with cats and now they think they're cats? That's, I think, what happened with the deer in this habitat. They think they're swans now because they kept swimming in the water. For one thing though, the male deer, which I think is called a buck. Like for one time I remember how you name like a certain gender of animals or like a certain like age of animals. I think a male deer is called a buck, but that, and the female one is a fawn. I don't know. Anyways, the buck, if that is the male name for a deer, never swam with the swans. But all the female ones, they took their turn. They were just like, yeah, we're swimming with the swans now. We are swans. I also saw that like, it was the day of release and the mothers already went crazy. Like there's a pelican now. I want the pelican though. Like the pelican I would see a habitat for. Because you would get like a pelican habitat in a zoo because they're not everywhere like swans are. Like a swan habitat in the Netherlands would be kind of like the same as like a duck habitat or a goose habitat here. It's just like it's a weird animal to put in a habitat because they're just there. Like it wouldn't actually be weird to put the swans in every habitat with a pond now. Because they're just there. Well, I probably shouldn't put the swans in the grizzly bear habitat. Like the swans are probably smart enough to not go in there. But yeah, I could put them in there because it's just, yeah, swans are everywhere in the Netherlands. Like every pond has at least seen one swan in its lifetime. And also, like, the Netherlands is just a lot of water. So there's swans everywhere. Anyways, back to the actual building. So I wanted to have like the really natural swamp vibes on one side of the habitat, but then a more structured area. What is it? Water thing on the other. So I basically just made it all look man-made. Gave it a little bit of like this is not how dikes or diken, because saying dikes is just a really weird thing when you've grown up calling it a dike for the most time, or diken, but it's not really looking like those, because those are usually just like grass and nothing else. So it's a little bit more artificial. Well, actually, dikes are artificial, but like it's a little bit more like, oh yeah, they wanted this to look pretty and not actually to like keep people safe from the water. And then I just went with that. Also, this is a thing that I started doing. Just when there's trees close to the water, I always put in some leaves. Because even in the summer, like, leaves get blown off with like a storm and they land in the water. They're not going to like fish out all of the leaves constantly every day. And so just putting some leaves in the water. Because even, as I said, in the summer, you might have like a summer storm or like just some heavy winds, or like a tree is just like, for whatever reason, there will be leaves somewhere. And in a pond, they're not going to fish them out. Like, yes, if the leaves land on the road, they might get cleaned up. But if they're in a pond, yeah, the stuff from Naturalis is not going to fish into ponds every day. They might like this is a thing that we do, of like cutting down the reeds. I don't know if it's like in winter or spring. I don't know, or I don't remember when it's exactly done. But like we do that to keep like the water sides, I think, safe, so that like the roots don't uproot all of the things. So that might, well, actually I don't think that would happen here, because I mean the reeds are only, well, actually it would happen. Like if the reeds spread to the area that we just built and not in the actual swamp habitat. Like if the reeds are in the swamp habitat, that's fine. If they go over to whatever dike area we have just built, they will probably get cut down at like once every year. Anyways, then there's also the thing of like the entrances to this habitat, which, oh boy. So I didn't want sliding doors, but I still wanted it to be wheelchair accessible. And for me, just maybe this is a wrong assumption, but like if you have to like manually like open doors, if you're like in a wheelchair, that might be a little bit annoying, or like just, well, annoying. So I still wanted automatic doors that like automatically open as you get near them. And then I thought like, oh yeah, you have those doors, which are just regular doors, but there's like a mechanism on the upper side of the door that opens it for you. Which then I realized, oh, I have actually made that before. Like I've put that in like the changing baby changing station. So I just took that from there. Like by this point, so many things are already in Naturalis that I can just zoom all over and just be like, yep, taking that, and taking that. However, I still for some reason can't put anything that I built on the workshop. Mostly because like most of the builds are like so ingrained into Naturalis. They're like, if I take them out, let's say I take the penguin habitat or like the Tasmanian devil habitat, like those buildings will look very weird because like they're half broken then. Like walls are going to be missing because they're like attached to that habitat, or like this build is like so large that like if I want to place it in the zoo, it's going to be like a habitat build, which is, when it comes to buildings, to me always seems a little bit annoying, because like you place it, but then you have to place it exactly right, otherwise the terrain gets heightened or lowered, and then that fucks up pathing and such. This is also why I love building Dutch zoos, because everything is flat. Like, yes, if there's a height difference, let's say for the Asian Highlands, that's completely man-made. Like, the Asian Highlands was completely man-made. Like, those hills and such, those weren't naturally there. They were made. Even though Naturalis is supposed to be in, like, more of the center, like, a little, not really in the west, so where everything is flat. That's the west of the Netherlands, or northwest. So Naturalis is supposed to be kind of in the center, slightly more east of the center in the Netherlands, so it could be a little bit more hilly here. But still, everything is flat here. So, like, when it comes to Naturalis, it's just very easy with the paths. Although, by this point, I've also just become so accustomed to using the pathing system in Planet Zoo that using any pathing system outside of Planet Zoo, outside of any of the Planet games, always just feels weird because it's just like, it doesn't work like it does in Planet Zoo, so I don't understand it. Anyways, now we are building the useless wheelchair lift because I forgot to place the buttons, which I will do after. But that's like, I mean, also this video is also, well, when I was editing it, it was very close to being an hour. Like, a lot of stuff got cut out because I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to crucify you with an hour-long video. So a lot got cut out already, and it's still close to 3 or like 45 minutes. So we're not doing that. So yeah, I'm just going to build like the buttons to like call for the elevator or the lift in just off screen. It will probably still not be in like the official in the cinematics because I'm going to take a little bit of a break for the rest of the week because I have been building for 2 weeks straight. Like, I've played no other game besides Planet Zoo, and I'm going a little bit crazy, which you might have seen from this video or heard from this video, because holy shit, I don't think I've kept one topic for like more than a minute. But yeah, so when it came to the wheelchair lift, I just wanted to keep it kind of small and such, so it's just like a lift on a track. It has like a separate section to the actual staircase. But yeah, when it came to the button, actually there is a button in the actual elevator, but that doesn't help if like you are like in a wheelchair. Like, I keep saying like in a wheelchair, you could be on crutches or such, but the wheelchair to me is just like the first thing that comes to mind. But when you're in a wheelchair and you're like on the upper section, like you're on the pier, but the actual lift is downstairs, like it doesn't help if the button is in the lift itself. It needs to be also separate so that you can call it. Like, if you are like in an elevator, just like any elevator, and there's no buttons to call the elevator, then like, yeah, how am I going to use this if the only button is in the elevator, that it only works on the level that it's on? So yeah, I forgot the button, and that's just going to be the main thing that I like will forever be haunted by now. But yeah, anyways, it was really fun to build, and also just really painful because I didn't change any of the water, as I said. But most of these like lifts, or at least the staircases, are really close to the water, so I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to have to delete some plants and just make it look like it was always there, because I'm not changing that water. Like, I actually made like, there's the main pot, like we have the main pot through the habitat, then we have the main pot for Naturalis, which is really easily visible because the main pot is the same color and everything everywhere. But there's the main pot, which is actually kind of a boundary for this habitat. I didn't really touch it that much, like even with like this dike that I've built, which is going with that pot. And that place is just kind of bare compared to everything else, because I'm just like, yeah, that's going to be for the next video, because I've been building for so long now. I have to place some boundaries of like, this is going just to be the next episode. But when it came to that, I was just like, we're not touching that. We're just going to leave that there. But also, because I didn't want to change the water, that's just going to be like, that's not going to be a bridge. Just not. I'm not going to put myself through that much hurt. But anyways, to close off the video, this is something that I always like to do when we are getting into new areas, is design a new lamp. Like every area in Naturalis has its own lamp. Like the Asian Highlands or the Asian area has its own lamp. The Australian area has its own lamp. Like every area has its own lamp. That is kind of taking ideas from like what I want that area to be. So when it came to the European area, I just wanted to be like really nature, a little bit cozy vibes, but still kind of feel like, basically feel like winter. So when it came to the actual lamp, I just thought I want something that looks like a tree. And then I finally found a reference that I could use. And then it was just like, yes, we now have a tree lamp. So yeah, that's the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button with a bucket of water, because that's the way to basically banish me to the Shadow Realm. And if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button with a tree lamp. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye bye.